It was a calm and quiet afternoon inside the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Most of the patients were resting peacefully in their rooms, while families sat close by, speaking in soft, almost whispered tones. Yet beneath that stillness, there was a current of energy running through the hallways. Like a quiet hum, word had spread that President Donald J. Trump was stopping by for a short and private visit. No cameras, no reporters, no grand stage, just a brief personal drop-in before he was scheduled to give a speech later that evening at a nearby military fundraiser. In room 217B, a young Marine named Lance Corporal Ethan Morales lay on his bed, completely unaware that his life was about to be touched in a way he couldn't have imagined. At just 23 years old, Ethan was already a combat veteran. Having served in Afghanistan, he had been gravely injured in Kandahar when his Unix convoy struck a roadside explosive. The blast had taken his left leg and damaged part of his hearing. Ethan had always been cheerful, strong-willed, and full of life, but since returning stateside, something inside him had gone quiet. He barely spoke anymore. His parents, Maria and Thomas Morales, stayed by his side day and night, taking turns holding his hand, trying to keep his spirit afloat. The doctors, nurses, and even visiting veterans offered encouragement daily, but nothing seemed to cut through the heavy cloud of silence and pain surrounding Ethan. As Secret Service agents moved through the corridor, securing the floor for the president's arrival, Ethan remained indifferent. He stared at the ceiling, lost in a world far removed from the bustling energy just outside his door. His thoughts were locked away, heavy and unreachable. Down the hall, Trump walked with Dr. Reynolds, the hospital's chief medical officer. They had already visited several patients. But Trump suddenly stopped and said he wanted to see one more soldier, someone who wasn't on the list. Dr. Reynolds hesitated, unsure whom to choose. The president lowered his voice and spoke with unusual calmness. "Take me to the one who hasn't smiled in the longest time." That single request brought him to room 217B, without any press, without a speech prepared, and with no one expecting anything unusual. Trump slowly pushed the door open. What unfolded inside that room would stay with everyone present forever, including the president himself. When Trump stepped into the room, Ethan barely reacted. The Marine glanced at him, gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then turned his gaze back toward the window, detached and distant. His mother Maria stood quickly, nervously straightening her son's blanket. Her voice trembled as she said, "Mr. President, this is our son, Ethan." Trump extended his hand, instinctively offering a greeting. But Ethan did not take it. He remained withdrawn, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the glass. The silence was thick. For a man used to applause, attention, and constant engagement, Trump suddenly felt out of place. His eyes fell on Ethan's missing legs, something he had seen countless times as commander-in-chief. But in that small, quiet hospital room, it carried a different kind of weight. "He doesn't talk much anymore," Thomas Morales said softly, breaking the silence. "Not since he came back." Trump nodded slowly. Instead of leaving or forcing conversation, he pulled a chair closer to Ethan's bedside and sat down, not as a politician, but as a man trying to understand. His voice softened. "Ethan," he said, "I don't want to give you a speech. I just came to say thank you for your service, for your sacrifice." Still, Ethan didn't reply. The silence stretched on. Trump then turned to Maria and Thomas. "Tell me about him before the Marines." Maria's lips curled into a faint, tearful smile. "He was the class clown. Always joking, pulling little pranks. He played the trumpet, said one day, after his tour, he wanted to teach history." Trump looked back at Ethan, now more curious. That's when he noticed something tucked under the Marine's pillow, a folded letter, edges worn from being held or hidden away. "What's that?" Trump asked gently. Maria hesitated. Her voice dropped. "He wrote it before his last mission. Said it was for us, in case something happened." Thomas nodded. "We never opened it. We thought maybe one day he'd read it himself." The air grew heavy with emotion. Trump leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the letter. Slowly, with great care, he picked it up and set it on the blanket. "May I?" he asked. There was no verbal answer. But this time, Ethan turned his head slightly and gave the smallest of nods. Trump unfolded the paper. The creases were deep. The ink smudged. He began to read aloud, his voice quieter than usual. "To anyone reading this, if you're holding it, I guess I didn't make it home the way I wanted. But I have no regrets. I volunteered. I trained. I believed in the brother next to me more than anything. If I'm gone or broken, don't feel sorry for me. Just remember who I was." Trump's voice faltered for a moment before continuing. "I joined the Marines because I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I didn't want medals or recognition. I wanted to make my country proud. If you're reading this, I hope I did." The room fell into silence. Ethan blinked, his lip trembling, and then, after weeks of silence, he whispered his first words. "I didn't think I'd come back like this." His voice cracked on those two words. Trump set the letter down slowly. He leaned forward. "But you did come back, Marine. You came back alive." That means something. Ethan turned, meeting Trump's eyes, directly for the first time. I lost my men, he said, voice breaking. They died. I didn't. Why? The weight of his question filled the room. Trump sat back, visibly moved. He didn't reach for cliches or speeches. Instead, he answered plainly, I've met many wounded soldiers, but not many who carry this kind of burden. You think survival makes you weak? I think it makes you brave. Maria wept softly, clutching her son's hand. Ethan shook his head. I feel useless, he muttered. Trump leaned closer. You wrote this letter thinking you wouldn't make it home, but you did. And now your country needs something else from you. Ethan frowned. Like what? Trump smiled faintly. Your voice. Those two words echoed in the room. For the first time, Ethan realized he still had something left to give, not as a soldier on the battlefield, but as a man who had survived to tell his story. Trump then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object, a commander-in-chief's coin. Placing it in Ethan's hand, he said, This isn't a medal, it's a promise that your service and your story will not be forgotten. Ethan gripped the coin tightly. Trump's eyes shifted toward the corner, where he spotted a dusty trumpet case. That yours? He asked. Ethan gave a slight nod. Haven't touched it since the blast. Trump picked it up carefully, almost reverently. Play something for them, he said softly. Those words struck Ethan deeply. With help from his father, he sat up, opened the case, and pulled out the silver trumpet. His hands trembled, but his fingers still remembered. He raised it to his lips and played. The notes were shaky, emotional, imperfect, but the melody of taps filled the room. Nurses, doctors, even Secret Service agents stood silently in the hallway, listening. Tears welled in Trump's eyes as he turned away, overcome. This wasn't politics. This wasn't ceremony. It was raw, human, and real. When the final note faded, the room remained silent. Ethan lowered the trumpet, exhausted but lighter than before. I played for them, Mom, he whispered. Trump stood to leave. Dr. Reynolds caught up with him in the hall. Sir, are you all right? Trump's face was solemn. How many others here are like him? Physically injured? Dr. Reynolds asked. Trump shook his head. No, the ones carrying wounds we can't see. Dr. Reynolds sighed. Too many. Trump pressed his lips tight. Outside, his motorcade waited to take him to the fundraiser. The original speech, crafted carefully by his staff, was waiting in his notes, but he stopped and told his aide, Scrap it, not the event, just the speech. I'll write a new one. Back in his limousine, Trump pulled out his phone and opened a blank document. He deleted the staff-prepared draft and began typing. Tonight, I was going to talk about victory, strength, and honor, but earlier today, I met a Marine who taught me something greater. His name is Lance Corporal Ethan Morales. As the motorcade drove toward the event, Trump's words poured out with unexpected clarity. He wrote about the letter, about the trumpet, about Ethan's guilt and survival, and about the truth he had told him: survival doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave. That night, before a ballroom filled with generals, veterans, and their families, Trump took the stage. But instead of a polished political address, he unfolded Ethan's letter. His voice echoed across the silent room. I met a Marine today. He thought he was broken, but he reminded me, and I remind you, that survival is courage. Not a single person moved, not a single camera dared flash. The audience listened as Trump read Ethan's words, as if the Marine himself were standing there. And when Trump said, God bless our soldiers, and God bless Ethan Morales, the applause that followed wasn't routine, it was raw, it was human. And in his hospital room, Ethan Morales watched it all unfold on TV, clutching the coin in his hand. For the first time since he had returned home, he felt seen. That night, after the fundraiser speech, clips began circulating online almost immediately. Reporters who had expected the usual patriotic remarks, instead, found themselves replaying a president's raw reading of a Marine's letter. Across social media, the words weren't described as Trump's speech. They were called Ethan's letter. Veterans, military families, and even ordinary citizens who rarely paid attention to politics suddenly found themselves talking about a wounded Marine whose trumpet had broken the silence of grief. Back at Walter Reed, Ethan sat in his bed, still holding the commander-in-chief's coin tightly. For the first time since his return, he didn't feel invisible. The silence that had consumed him for weeks had been pierced not by pity, but by recognition. He wasn't just another broken soldier tucked away in a hospital ward. His story had reached beyond the walls of that room. By morning, the response was overwhelming. Ethan's name trended on social media. Military support groups and veteran organizations began sharing his story. Messages poured in from every corner of the country, handwritten letters, emails, even video recordings. A Vietnam veteran wrote, I never told anyone about my nightmares. Your letter gave me the courage to finally talk to my family. A young teacher in Ohio shared, my students wrote essays after watching you play the trumpet. You showed them that strength can look like survival. Though touched, Ethan struggled with the attention. He didn't feel like a hero. Guilt still clawed at him for surviving when his brothers hadn't. But something was shifting. For the first time, his silence wasn't isolating him, it was being replaced with connection. 2 days later, a nurse entered his room with a message. "Private call for you, from the White House." Ethan blinked, confused. When he answered, the familiar voice on the line said, "Lency Corporal Morales." "Yes, sir," Ethan stammered. Trump chuckled warmly. "Didn't think I'd call, did you?" "Honestly, no, sir." The president's tone was casual, almost like an old friend. "Ethan, I've been thinking. America doesn't need more polished speeches. It needs real stories. It needs truth like yours." Ethan stayed silent, unsure how to respond. Trump continued, "You wrote that letter, believing you wouldn't come back, but you did. And now, I want you to help me do something meaningful. What could I possibly do?" Ethan asked quietly. Trump paused, then said, "Help me write the Memorial Day speech." Ethan's heart raced. "Me, I'm not a writer. You're a Marine. You're a survivor. That's all that matters." For the first time, Ethan considered the possibility. His mother, Maria, whispered later, "This isn't about you, son. It's about every soldier who never came home." Her words sank deep. The next day, Ethan began writing. At first, every word felt heavy, dredging up memories he had tried to bury. He wrote about the convoy in Kandahar, about the brotherhood he had lost, about Corporal Jameson, the friend who pulled him from the wreckage just before the second blast took his life. Survivor's guilt gnawed at him as he typed, but Trump's encouragement pushed him forward. Each draft he sent to the president came back with the same note at the end: "Make it more you." One afternoon, Ethan received a visitor, Mrs. Ellen Jameson, the mother of his fallen friend. She walked in slowly, carrying a small wooden box. "I heard you're writing something," she said softly. Ethan tried to stand, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Jameson, I tried to save him." "I know," she whispered gently. She opened the box, revealing Corporal Jameson's dog tag and a letter addressed to Ethan. It was one her son had written but never delivered. The words cut straight to Ethan's heart. "If I don't make it, don't shut down. You've got a voice people will listen to. Use it, brother." Tears fell freely as Ethan clutched the dog tag. That night, his writing shifted. His drafts became braver, clearer, filled with purpose. Jameson's voice lived through his own dot. As Memorial Day approached, speculation grew. Reporters whispered that the president was preparing something unusual, maybe even Corrigan with a wounded Marine. Still, Ethan refused to be in the spotlight. "This isn't about me," he insisted. Trump respected that. "No cameras on you," he promised. The ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery. A vast field of white headstones stretched across the horizon, a sea of sacrifice. As the crowd settled, Trump stepped to the podium. No teleprompters, no scripted lines. Just a single sheet of paper. "I stand before you today," he began, slowly. "Not just as your president, but as a student of courage, because a young Marine taught me something no general ever could. His name is Lance Corporal Ethan Morales." Ethan, sitting quietly in the third row with his cane, lowered his head. Trump's voice grew stronger. "Ethan wrote about silence, about loss, about surviving when others did not. He reminded me that leadership isn't about strength alone. It's about listening to those who carry battles unseen." His voice cracked. "To those we lost, we remember you. To those who returned in pieces, we honor you. And to those still fighting invisible wars, we hear you now." The cemetery fell into profound silence. Veterans wept openly. Families clutched one another. It wasn't just a presidential address, it was the echo of a Marine's unspoken pain reaching a nation. Afterward, Ethan walked slowly to Corporal Jameson's grave. He placed the dog tag gently at the headstone, saluted, and whispered, "We did it, brother." As he turned, a young boy saluted him shyly. His father, a retired medic, whispered, "That's the Marine from the speech." Ethan returned the salute, his heart heavy but proud. In the following days, letters poured into his hospital room. Some from fellow Marines, others from widows of fallen soldiers, even from schoolchildren. One line appeared again and again. The story gave us hope." Ethan began writing back, one response at a time. Each reply, even if brief, helped him heal. He wasn't voiceless anymore. His words mattered. Weeks later, Trump called again. "Ethan," he said, "let's do something bold." Ethan chuckled. "Didn't we already? This is bigger. I want you to help launch a national project, storytelling by veterans. No politics, just truth." That's how the One Voice Project was born, a nonprofit dedicated to giving wounded soldiers, veterans, and families a space to share their stories in their own words. Not for history books, but for healing. Months passed. Ethan's recovery continued. His book, I Came Back Like This, climbed bestseller lists. Veterans across the country began recording videos, writing letters, sharing experiences they had hidden. For years, classrooms studied them, families bonded over them. Conversations began changing, and through it all, Ethan stayed humble. He reminded people again and again, Bravery isn't surviving the blast. Bravery is waking up the next day and deciding to keep going. 1 year later, Ethan stood on a small stage at a local high school. Behind him, a screen showed photos of his platoon, some smiling, some forever frozen in time. Looking at the students before him, he said, "People call me brave for surviving, but the truth, bravery is living each day for the ones who didn't make it back." A teenager raised her hand. "Do you regret joining the Marines?" Ethan smiled, his voice steady. "No, because even through pain, I found purpose." At the back of the room, quietly and without notice, Donald Trump sat among the parents. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the Marine's voice, once locked away in silence, now carried across a nation. And it all began in one quiet hospital room at Walter Reed.